Are Trump and Elon Musk now at war with one another? And what does this actually mean, not only for the Trump administration, but really for the entire MAGA movement? Because anybody that's been paying attention has realized that not only did Trump win very significantly with a lot of support because of his policies and because of the promises he made, but Elon Musk also played a big role on this, on buying Twitter and turning it into X and actually providing a platform where new media could come out and be influential. There has been this coordination between Donald Trump and Elon Musk, especially with respect to Doge, that I think has been hugely beneficial. But now there's a bit of a rift that seems to be taking place. And what we're going to be discussing today is what is the true nature of it? And is there any way that this could actually be, like really, not the way the media always says, could this actually be a good thing long term? We're going to argue today that there's actually two ways that this could go down. One of them very good, one of them very bad. But before we get to any of that, we have to talk about what the true source of the issue is. All of that on this episode of Making the Argument. I'm your host, Nick Freitas. With me in the studio, my beautiful bride, Tina, Queen of the Bees.
Hello, everyone.
And Christian, that slacker. That slacker's off in Italy right now, gallivanting along the countryside, his homeland. His original homeland of his ancestry.
Maybe he'll bring home a wife.
Oh, could be. Could be. I don't know. But anyways,
Italian women are pretty.
We look forward to having him back. Okay, so how did this all start? Well, I would argue that it was with this tweet that was delivered out on June 3rd, which we have up, which we're putting up right now. And on X, I shouldn't have called it a tweet. On X, this post came out from Elon Musk stating, "I'm sorry, but I just can't stand it anymore. This massive, outrageous, pork-filled congressional spending bill is a disgusting abomination. Shame on those who voted for it. You know you did wrong. You know it. This so far has 137 million views, 675,000 likes, 106,000 shares, and 56,000 comments." Now, again, why is this such a big deal? Because this is the first time I'm aware that Trump or that Elon Musk has come out and actively oppose something that Trump was very actively pushing for, kind of better known as the Big Beautiful Bill. So what is the Big Beautiful Bill? Essentially, this is the work that is being done right now between the House has already passed it. The Senate is going through the process right now of working on this reconciliation bill, and this is ultimately going to be the budget. So this is the first budget during the Trump administration that Trump has really been able to kind of craft in conjunction with the House and members of the Senate. And there's a lot of good things in it, but there's also some bad. And the general argument that we always hear on everything like this is, look, it's politics, right? There's always going to be compromise. And I think if let's all be grown-ups about this. We know that's the case, and we know that to some degree that needs to be true. The question is what is the nature of the compromise, and is the compromise an appropriate one? The other thing that we're going to have to get into is understanding some of the procedures here, because there are procedural things that a lot of people say, I don't care about that. Just get it done. Not how our government works. And so we're going to talk about how you get it done within the procedures which currently exist. Okay, so we're going to discuss all of that. So let's go to some of the other things, the other reasons that Elon Musk gave that he doesn't like this. So you see this other tweet from here. Elon Musk, America is going bankrupt extremely quickly, and everyone seems to be whistling past the graveyard. He goes, the Department of Defense budget is a very big budget. It's $1 trillion a year, and interest payments on the national debt just exceeded the Department of Defense budget. They're over $1 trillion a year just in interest and rising. We're adding $1 trillion to our debt, which our kids and grandkids are going to have to pay somehow every 3 months, and then soon it's going to be every 2 months, and then every month. And then the only thing we'll be able to pay is interest. And it's just like a person at scale that has racked up too much credit card debt. This does not have a good ending. We have to reduce the spending. Elon also went over to say in response to a Rand Paul tweet, Rand Paul said, while I oppose increasing the debt ceiling by $5 trillion, that's a projection, I enthusiastically support making the tax cuts permanent and could vote for the big, not yet beautiful bill if the debt ceiling were voted on separately. Elon Musk says this spending bill contains the largest increase in the debt ceiling in U.S. history. It is the debt slavery bill. Okay. Now, I want to go over to the other side here. If you go over to the White House, whitehouse.org, he actually has a site going up and talking about the one big, beautiful bill. And then he talks about the various industries that are supporting it. He talks about the various things that happen. So you see this kind of scrolling thing of increases child tax credit, slashes taxes on Social Security, ends the tax on tips, ends the tax on overtime, brings jobs back to the United States, right? And then he goes through and there's a calculator here so you can kind of figure out what it could potentially mean for you, et cetera. So we definitely have people that, again, I support, have supported, continue to support on both sides of this issue. I want to take a look at something from the Tax Foundation, because while there have definitely been articles or things that the Tax Foundation has put out, I generally see them as a pretty reliable source when it comes to looking at tax policy. And they get into some of the nuances, right? Because there's a lot of things that sound superficially good that have problems with it. Sometimes it sounds superficially good, but it's actually bad. Sometimes it's a mixed bag, right? And I think Tax Foundation does a pretty good job of staying intellectually honest and intellectually consistent when it comes to discussing those particular issues. But before we get to that, I want to actually share with you this episode's sponsor, and that is Young America's Foundation, because Young America's Foundation actually has a very interesting opportunity coming up for middle school and high school students at the Reagan Boyhood Home in Dixon, Illinois. This is an affordable, all-inclusive experience, and YAF is able to provide travel assistance for families that need it. Students will be able to engage with the ideas that reflect the conservative values that America was built on, and they're actually going to get to hear from and interact with a variety of speakers, to include people like Dr. Ben Carson, Chloe Cole, and myself. I've actually participated in these events with Young America's Foundation before. They're outstanding. And one of the things I like to do at these events when students attend is I like to challenge the students. I don't just get up there and talk to them. In fact, at the last time I was talking to YAF students, I got up there and I started off my whole speech. I said, which one of you in the crowd likes to debate? And this kid raises his hand real quick. I'm like, all right, stand up. I said, I'm going to debate as the socialist. You need to defend the conservative and free market position. And we had this exchange for 5 minutes, and the students got into it and they asked questions, and it was just this incredible back and forth. So if you're a parent that is interested in being able to provide your middle school or high school student the opportunity to participate in these kinds of debates, this kind of instruction and learning and interaction, 3-day event, Dixon, Illinois, Reagan's Boyhood Home, excellent opportunity. In fact, if you go right now to yaf.org, that's yaf.org/Reagan Summer, right? Go there. You use my discount code. That's Nick25. You're going to get 25% off the entire event, right? yaf.org/Reagan Summer. Use the promo code Nick25 to get 25% off. I sincerely hope to see you there. All right, let's get to this Tax Foundation article. So Tax Foundation, this is May 23rd, 2025. And this is like a summary. And they said the good, the bad, and the ugly in the one big, beautiful bill. Now, keep in mind, these things are always updating. This was May 23rd, so it's a little bit older, but they get to some of the key components here. And one of the first things that they address is the good, right? So what is the good? The bill makes some smart tax cuts and revenue increases. Most of the good tax policy aligns with Tax Foundation's principle of stability. It permanently extends the rates and brackets of the 2017 individual tax cuts. This provides certainty for households and stability to this portion of the tax code. The bill permanently extends the larger standard deduction and the alternative minimum tax threshold that were only temporary in the TCJA. The TCJA is the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. These two provisions have greatly simplified the tax code for millions of taxpayers. So this is an important thing to understand about the Tax Foundation, right? They're not just about, hey, lower all the taxes. They are about trying to create consistency. Because one of the things that's very, very frustrating for businesses and for individuals is not just having to pay taxes, but when paying taxes are complicated, when there's reams and reams of things you have to go through, you got to hire a professional to help you do, which should be fairly simple taxes. So Tax Foundation is very, very big on how do we make a very, very simple tax code that's easy to comply, that is really focused on just providing for the legitimate functions of government, not, everything else. They go on. Lawmakers also provide permanently higher thresholds for expensing certain equipment for smaller business and investment amounts. Regarding the estate and gift tax, the bill institutes a permanent and inflation-adjusted exemption level of $15 million, which begins in 2026, enhancing stability here as well. Again, I wish they'd just get rid of it altogether, but if they're going to do this, this is at least a move in the right direction. The bill provides a degree of certainty and stability in the international tax code. while removing the threat of substantially higher taxes at the end of the year for U.S.-based multinational companies by permanently extending a slightly less generous version of current policy for the international regime. Moving away from some of the permanent changes, the bill makes improvements to cost recovery for U.S. businesses relative to current law from 2025 to 2029. The bill reintroduces expensing for investment in equipment and other short-lived assets in domestic research and development. As a new policy, certain qualified structures are eligible for expensing, blah, blah, blah. The bill also has some good policies that raise revenue relative to current law by reducing some of the tax code's many tax credits, deductions, and other preferences. Okay, this is going to seem a little bit counterintuitive to certain people. Like, well, wait a second. Don't we want the tax credits, right? Aren't these tax cuts? You can make two arguments here. One side of the argument is like, look, anything that causes Americans to pay less in taxes, that's a net benefit, right? And look, there's a fair argument to be made there. Another argument is whenever you start playing with the tax code and you start getting individual tax credits, what you're doing is you're manipulating the economy in favor of certain behaviors as opposed to just lowering all of the base rates, across the board. So instead of saying, here's more of your own money, it's saying, well, here's more of your own money if you do this, or here's more of your own money if you do that. And that's, again, there's a good conservative argument to be made that is not the appropriate way to cut taxes. So what I would say is that I think generally like-minded people can disagree on this particular point, but this is what they did. He goes, the largest area of reform is the Inflation Reduction Act's IRA green energy tax credits. This bill raises about $500 billion over a decade, reducing the cost of these credits by about half. Here's why I think repealing this particular tax credit. So again, you may be thinking to yourself, well, Nick, this just means the government's going to get more money. The problem with a lot of the green energy stuff out there is that it's heavily subsidized by the government, which is to say that if the government wasn't treating green energy very differently than it treats everything else, none of this would be sustainable. And so one side of that argument says, well, okay, but don't we want more green energy? Whether you do or you don't, what you want is affordable energy that is hopefully, responsible, but you want that energy to be sustainable within the marketplace for two reasons. One, if it's not sustainable in the marketplace, then it's not that you've made green energy more affordable, you're just hiding the costs. You're just hiding the actual cost of the green energy. And so now taxpayers are essentially fitting the bill for stuff that other people are benefiting from. And so, that's one problem. The other thing that you do with these tax credits in certain respects, like the way these tax credits are organized, is you shelter the business or the industry from making the necessary improvements in order to be more sustainable within the marketplace. Because now when you give all these subsidies for green energy or you give all these tax credits for green energy, instead of them having to focus all of their efforts on something that would actually work within the marketplace, now they focus their efforts on things that get them the subsidy or the tax credits. So you create kind of a perverse incentive with respect to how green energy actually develops. So I think this is a good thing that they got rid of a lot of these. Several IRA credits are also repealed, like those for electric vehicles, residential energy projects, which are expensive and ineffective, while most of the others are restricted or phased out quicker. However, the bill expands and extends the clean fuel production tax credit and introduces additional compliance challenges for many of the credits. That's more of a bad. Health insurance premium tax credits, projected to cost about $1 trillion over the next decade, are pared back about 20% by tightening eligibility rules and reducing improper payments. The bill also tightens some of the tax-exempt rules, such as for unrelated business income. The bill also permanently extends the TCJA's limits on some itemized deductions, such as for mortgage interest, and limits each dollar for itemized deductions for top earners. However, the bill waters down the TCJA's $10,000 cap on deductions for state and local taxes, known as SALT. Okay, I want to talk about SALT here very, very briefly, and I'm not trying to get too wonky. It's just important to understand something. What SALT essentially does is it says, and what they're doing here is they're raising it to $40,000 for taxpayers earning less than $500,000 a year. So you file jointly, you earn less than $500,000 a year. You pay $40,000 or you pay your state taxes. What the federal government is essentially doing with SALT is they're saying, look, we're not going to double tax you on taxes you already paid to the state. And so on one side, you're like, that's a good thing, right? Like I'm already having to pay these taxes and now you're double taxing me by making me pay, taxes on the same amount of income to the federal government. The problem with it is on the perverse incentive side is states that raise taxes more, right? States that raise your state taxes more, you're getting to offset that when you pay your federal taxes. And so what SALT ends up doing is it kind of provides this perverse incentive by letting states get away from taxing you more at the state level so you don't have to pay more in federal taxes. And so you could make the argument that, okay, well, this actually benefits high tax states like California while punishing lower tax states like Tennessee. So that's the other thing to keep in mind, because on the surface, this just looks like a win-win. Like, why wouldn't you do this? But this is again, part of the perverse incentive structures that are created for this. So let's get into some of the bad. Okay. And again, this is focused more on the tax side of this bill. There's other spending sides that are also issues. Rather than making the most pro-growth features permanent, the bill spends far too much money on political gimmicks and carve-outs, resulting in a package that provides a modest boost to the economy, but a huge fiscal cost. It introduces tax exemptions for overtime pay and tips, as well as deduction for auto loan interest and a new additional standard deduction available for all seniors, all of which violate basic tax principles of treating taxpayers equally. Combined, these four provisions cost about $300 billion over the 4 years they are in effect, and if eventually extended beyond that date, the cost would more than double over the next decade. Complicated eligibility restrictions reduce the cost somewhat, but it would be better to not introduce these bad ideas in the first place. Okay, this is a part where I kind of break a little bit with the tax foundation. What they're essentially saying is that things like taxes on tips, taxes on overtime, you're now treating certain taxpayers differently. And I get that. And again, they're not making a bad argument, right? You just got to figure out what you prioritize more. This is one of those areas where I'm like, look, this is not a perfect tax cut, but I still like it. I still like it. I still think it has some value. But again, honest people can disagree about whether or not this is the best way to implement tax cuts. The other thing that they're going to be pointing out here is that when you do things like, hey, we're not going to tax tips. Okay, so now our more industry is going to move away from the idea of paying you a salary in order to allow you to get tips. Are you going to have to tip even more now, right? These are some of potentially unintended consequences that we have to take into consideration with respect to the way the tax code is manipulated. And again, it's fair to bring this up. Taxes on overtime is kind of a similar thing, although that one's a little bit easier to manage.
I just wanted to chime in real quick.
Yeah.
Is I understand that there's a lot of people that don't like tax cut carve outs and things like that. The reason I am not in that camp, where I actually am glad that they're implementing, they don't want to tax your Social Security. I think that's great. Uh-huh. I think it's great they don't want to tax overtime because they're basically rewarding work ethic at that point. Taxing tips, to me, a tip shouldn't be taxed because it's over and above the service rendered, or it's over and above, the salary gained. It is something because you did so well serving, you're getting a tip. I don't think the government needs their hand in that pot. I'm a big fan of getting the government's hand out of every pot we possibly can. And if all we can do is smack that hand in individual jars, then I'll do it. I don't care. Because at some point, if the Democrats want to bring these taxes back, they have to make the case to the people as to why it's a good idea to tax overtime and why it's a good idea to tax tips and why it's a good idea to tax Social Security. So I feel like they did a good job finding something that would be very unpopular to bring back.
And I think all those are all good arguments in favor. And right. And look, I've supported these things, so I'm not trying to be disingenuous or intellectually inconsistent. Allow this name of the episode's making the argument. Allow me to make the argument in reverse. You have now give preferential treatment to one type of employee over a different type of employee. So like Erica brought this up in the chat because I've worked tipped and non-tipped jobs. I shouldn't be taxed more for making only hourly or salaried wages. So the question is that, are you now encouraging industry to essentially say, hey, we're not going to pay you as much because we're going to give you the ability to take tips because the government can't tax that? And does that create an environment where now every time you walk in, it's the complaint we get now where every time you do anything, it's like, oh, that's going to ask you a question. The other part that I would say is this, and I'm going to equate this to a different issue, gun laws. So one of the things that a lot of pro-gun groups don't like is carve-outs for concealed carry for things like judges or off-duty police officers or veterans or military, because they'll say, wait a second, you're creating a special class of people that are then able to exercise certain civil liberties that you're not giving to other people. And it does two things. One, it creates that separate class, but two, it also now takes those people out of the coalition to argue for everyone to be able to get greater civil liberties. So take that same argument and now apply it to taxes. What you've just done is the people that are not taxed on tips, or the people that maybe have jobs that are more overtime related and they're not getting taxed on that, they're no longer fighting for lower taxes across the board because they feel like their individual issue has been addressed, when in really we should be addressing the issue for everyone. Now, again, maybe you find that convincing, maybe you don't find it convincing, maybe you find that the cost benefit analysis is still better to not tax overtime and tips. And that was kind of generally my position.
Right. I mean, even with school choice, you carried bills that would have given school choice to low income and special needs kids.
Yeah.
So it's like, just because we can't get it for everybody, sometimes the argument is compelling enough, especially like people that are locked into Social Security. And I mean, they basically been raped by the government on the whole Social Security scheme. And then they're going to go, oh yeah, hey, we're going to pay you this payment that we forced you to give to us your entire working life. And now we're going to tax that again.
Yeah.
On the way back to you.
No,
it's so in my opinion, I understand the argument behind carve-outs and not having the people arguing that everybody should pay or should not pay this. In my opinion, the more we can smack the hand of the government out of the various cookie jars, the better.
No, I get it. And again, I think it's a fair argument. I have advocated in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I've advocated for no tax on overtime, no tax on tips, right? So, but I do think it's fair for people to understand that there actually is a decent conservative argument for saying this is not the best way to approach it.
Yeah,
so,
I could see both ways.
Okay.
I just still have my opinion on it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Me too. All right. So further on with some of the other things that are bad. Another costly mistake is the route lawmakers have taken on the treatment of non-corporate businesses. In 2017, lawmakers introduced a 20% deduction for business income that is taxed on the individual rate schedule and not at the corporate tax rate of 21%. Taxes on dividends and capital gains are a second layer of tax on corporate income. The non-corporate businesses, also known as pass-throughs, face a few changes in this bill, but the main change is that the deduction is made permanent and increased to 23%, which costs more than $700 billion over the next decade, $800 billion according to the Joint Committee on Taxation. This will further decrease the effective tax rates that pass-throughs face on their income relative to corporate profits, making the tax code less neutral with respect to business form. Again, this is something where you can make an argument in either direction here. Tax Foundation is remaining intellectually consistent to the idea that the best thing to do is just reduce them across the board, not give preferential treatment to one type of business over the other. I get it, but again, I don't think.
I have a hard time as soon as they start saying this tax cut is going to cost X number of dollars. I have a problem because government services cost money. Tax cuts do not. And so you need to work with the money you have in the coffers, and reducing the money in the coffers means reduce the spending.
Yeah.
If they're not willing to reduce the spending, we have a major problem. But reducing all these taxes to basically bring everything to a head even more is going to force them to reduce the spending unless they find other ways to tax other things, because these are the type of taxes nobody's going to want to bring back.
Yeah.
No one wants to put their name on that.
Yeah.
And so where are they going to tax instead?
Well, and that's actually you're bringing up a very, very good point here. And this goes into the political reality, right? So the tax reality is you want them to be low. You want them to only be for the purposes of legitimate functions of government. You don't want them to be used to try to incentivize certain types of behavior. And you want them to be as broad-based and fair and as easy to collect as possible. That's the ideal. Okay?
That's why I don't like new taxes, like the cigarette tax, for instance. It's basically like a sin tax, right?
Yeah.
The government gets used to the money that brings in, but the nature of the tax is to discourage people from doing it. So when it reduces itself down, but the government has gotten used to that level of taxes, the government starts looking for other ways to get that money back, because no one's smoking anymore and no one's, we're not getting this money anymore. So we need to get it somewhere else. And so they start searching for other ways to get that money. So that's why I don't like those type of taxes. I can't look at it and go, oh, well, it's their fault for smoking. No, you're training the government to expect more money. That's a bad thing.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. Um, what I was trying to say there, I thought though, is that there's the ideal with respect to tax policy, and then there's the political reality with respect to what you can convince enough people to
Right.
vote for or to support. And so some of this stuff falls within that realm of maybe it's not ideal, but is it a step in the right direction? And that's the debate that we can have on stuff like this. And I think it's a good debate. My big thing is I still want people, I never want people to lose sight of the ideal. Yes, we have to deal with certain political realities, but let's never lose sight of the ideal. Okay, now we get to the ugly, all right? This is what they think is even worse about the bill. The bill further complicates the tax code in several ways, sending taxpayers through a maze of new rules and compliance costs that in many cases probably outweigh any potential tax benefits. No tax on tips, overtime, and car loans comes with various conditions and guardrails that, if enacted, will likely require hundreds of pages of IRS guidance to interpret. The changes to the IRA credits, while commendable in many ways, keep in place some of the most complicated rules. Example, bonus credits for meeting prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements, and add new foreign entity of concern restrictions that may make many of the credits cost prohibitive. While the bill provides new incentives for savings, the rules are so complex and narrowly targeted that few taxpayers will choose to go through the ordeal. The tax code is already littered with a confusing array of special preferences for savers, including tax-preferred accounts for education, health, retirement, and other purposes that go largely unused by low and middle income households. I will say that this is a fair critique. I know that whenever it comes time for me to do my taxes each year, I hate it. I absolutely dread it. This is why I pay an accountant. And even then I hate it because it's, I need this form. I need this form. What about this form? And then something comes late and you're up doing that. Oh, that form didn't come over in the scan well. And it's a nightmare. And then and again, you're hiring people to try to find credits that you're potentially eligible for and use that. And what about this? And did you save all your receipts for that? And it's a nightmare.
I will say they're adding a new foreign entity of concern restriction.
Yeah.
I think that aside from the fact that it adds to the paperwork involved, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing.
No, yeah, that
because
I don't agree
for
with
national security and things like that. And then and what is the incentive here? The trade-off here is, people decide they're not going to hire foreign people because they don't want to have to jump through that hoop. I'm okay with that.
Yeah. He also said, they also have a problem with, let me see here. Rather than simplifying these rules and liberalizing them to allow saving for any purpose without penalty, universal savings account, the bill expands health savings accounts and to a lesser degree savings accounts for higher education and for individuals with disabilities, drawing new lines to define eligible expenses and allowing larger contributions under certain conditions. The bill also adds something called Trump accounts, an entirely new type of incentive that includes a $1,000 baby bonus for children born over the next 4 years, courtesy of Uncle Sam or the taxpayers. The accounts encourage saving by allowing taxpayers contributions of up to $5,000 a year that can grow tax-free until the beneficiary withdraws the money at age 18 or older, at which point the withdrawal is subject to capital gains tax if used for qualified expenses, including tuition, first home purchase, or small business expenses. Or otherwise, ordinary income tax plus a 10% penalty. Various other rules and conditions apply. This is a more limited and restricted tax benefit than any existing savings incentives, such as 529 accounts, and is unlikely to be used by any great extent as a saving vehicle. The major effect is to introduce a new baby bonus entitlement that requires taxpayers to track yet another small dollar account for 18 years. This is a missed opportunity to simplify saving and improve financial stability for Americans. I will say this. We did a whole Y Minute on why the government keeps – there's been a push lately to try to relieve some of the burden on working families because it turns out having kids is an important part of a civilization's survival. Yeah, it turns out we're not suffering from overpopulation. It turns out we're actually running in the opposite direction in many places in the West. And government try to do things with incentives, child credits, things like that. They don't seem to work very well. And the reason why we explained in our Y Minute was it's because when you look at the litany of reasons why people have kids, poverty is not the best explanation for why people don't have kids. And we know this because you go to the third world, a lot of people are living in poverty and they have big families. Now, you could say that's higher mortality rates, certainly true.
Poor people do have more kids.
Yeah, you could say that when it comes to things like, agrarian societies and whatnot, a lot of times kids are actually important to, the income of the family. There was estimates in Bangladesh that low-income families, children actually make up about 25% of the entire total family income, and the family would otherwise starve without that income. So there's all these various factors that go into play. But most people do not choose to have a kid or not have a kid based off of a tax credit that the government offers. That's just the reality. If governments actually wanted to encourage families, the way that they would do it would be just by providing a stable, safe environment where they're certainly not punishing people for having kids like we do in some cases. But they don't try to come up with kind of weird incentive programs, which in many cases actually produce negative results, such as increased out of wedlock birth. We saw this with a lot of the Great New Deal. The idea was, we're going to help single mothers. Okay, well, did you help single mothers, or did you actually provide an economic incentive to be a single mother? And there's a lot of data that we can look on this, and it comes from both sides of the aisle, actually, which demonstrate that sometimes government meddling in these things do not achieve the desired outcomes. And so, again, while some of this looks good, it can have unintended consequences, and it's important to just recognize that. At the bottom here, however, the bill also allows certain tax-exempt entities to contribute to Trump accounts under rules to be established by the Treasury Secretary, which could lead to substantial benefits for some account holders. As well, the bill establishes a new tax credit for donations to scholarship-granting organizations, limited to $5,000 per individual annually through 2029, which may be intended to work in tandem with Trump accounts. This could help many low-income and disadvantaged children receive a better education, but it requires a lot of rulemaking and administration by the Treasury Department and IRS, which is already overwhelmed with the task of administering our complicated tax code and multiple benefit programs under current law. So that's the good, the bad, and the ugly, according to the Tax Foundation. All right, so you get a little bit of everything in there. Next thing I want to do is I want to see an argument from Mark Wayne Mullen. So if you do watch our Doge Watch episode, we did a Doge Talks with Senator Mark Wayne Mullen. And we kind of get into this wonky discussion of how does the budget process work. And full disclosure, I like Senator Mark Wayne Mullen. We don't agree on everything, but I found our conversation to be very, very useful because I asked him an important question, and that was, how do we know you guys are doing what you say you're going to do? And one of the biggest things that he said, he's like, Nick, you got to watch the budget process. We got to have a bill through the House, through the Senate by the end of July so that we can actually work on something that's ready to go in, September? I think it was September. So we have something ready to go, right? And so he did. He like full credit, right? He gave a good answer on what we need to do in order to watch what's going on. This is Senator Mark Wayne Mullen's advocacy for the big, beautiful bill.
Can I say something just real quick?
Yeah.
One of the things when you did your Doge Watch and you asked, what do you watch for? And they were saying you need to start seeing rescission bills come through. And there is the first of many rescission bills going through Congress right now.
Yeah.
That's a $9.4 billion in funding for all kinds of things. But it's the first of many rescission bills.
And now it's a little frustrating to me that we're in June now, and we're just getting our first rescission bill, but again, this part is important because when people flippantly say they all suck or they all look, members of Congress are people just like anybody else, right? You have good people, you have bad people, you have you have a spectrum of people in there, right? But there's certain incentive structures which exist within Congress or any legislature that are problematic. So I'm trying to be intellectually honest with everybody here that's engaging. So I'm going to read what Mark Wayne Mullen has to say. We can analyze it, all right? Mark Wayne Mullen, most Americans get the mission behind President Trump's historic One Big Beautiful Bill, but there's been some back and forth. Here's what you need to know. And he goes, fact, President Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill was designed by the president himself, his team, and his closest MAGA allies in Congress to deliver the MAGA agenda. This is the president's vision. No bill is perfect, but we have a once-in-a-lifetime bill to deliver exactly what POTUS promised. Lower taxes, a secure border, strong military, and reining in spending, and with only 51 votes. Now, the reason why he brings up the only 51 votes is this has to do with the procedure of all of this. Typically in the Senate, in order to get something done, if it's just a regular vote, you need to have 60 votes. It's not good enough to have 51. You need to have 60. Why? Because of the filibuster. So if you have a bill the Democrats are really, really angry about, and they invoke the filibuster, that bill will never come to a vote. Now, some people will say, the filibuster needs to go. I will just remind everyone, we loved the filibuster when it was Republicans being able to hold up stuff from the Biden agenda. But that's the nature of what he's talking about. There are certain types of votes, there's certain bills, certain pieces of legislation, which do not require that 60%, only 51. And the argument Senator Mullen is making here is that's why it has to go through this process, and that's why the things that are in there that are in there. That's the argument he's making. Take it or leave it. That's the argument he's making. It's simple. President Trump went huge in November. He helped us deliver a House and Senate GOP majority. It's our job to help him deliver the. Okay, so there we go. Now he says this, as we speak, many of us are still working with the White House on improving this bill in the Senate. Okay, that's a good thing. That's a positive thing, right? Because as I've been very clear, I have some very, very significant critiques of this bill, right? Keep in mind, this reconciliation process can only be used for non-discretionary, AKA mandatory spending. Stick with me. All that means is because President Trump's MAGA bill only requires 51 votes versus 60, there are strict limits on what can be included. This is a frustrating but fair argument, right? So just keep that in mind. This is a frustrating but fair argument. He's not lying. He's not playing tricks. He's telling you the way this process works within the Senate. The appropriations process is how we can aggressively cut more discretionary spending already in the works. Plus, we've got the rescissions process, sends Congress a package of funding to cut to make DOGE cuts permanent. It's a lot of government lingo, but we'll do our best to keep breaking it down. Bottom line is trust President Trump. He made a lot of promises on the trail, and this bill delivers. Okay. I want to go on one other thing. Mark Wayne Mullins said this too. On the debt limit, if we do not do it now, when it only takes 51 Senate votes, we will have to give away that White House in negotiations with Democrats under a 60-vote threshold. On balancing the budget, I agree it's a top POTUS priority. It takes some time. We're working on it. Okay, here's what I'll say about this. I actually think, as frustrated as I am with this bill, he makes a solid argument for this is the best we can do, or this is part of the best we can do. I don't want to put words in his mouth. With the rules of the Senate, which says that when we're addressing these issues, we only need 51 votes. The moment you include other things, you need 60. And now this becomes a very, very different negotiation. Okay, that's the argument he's making. It is not an intellectually dishonest argument. I will put it at that. Do I find it completely convincing? No. But I think it's a fair argument. I think it's probably the one of the better arguments that you can make for what's going forward. The other thing I wanted to do here is I wanted to bring up, let me type it up here. Actually, let me just go over here and put it in. We're going to look at Rand Paul. Now, again, there are some people, to include President Trump himself, that are frustrated with Rand Paul right now for obvious reasons. You've seen the same thing with Thomas Massie. You've seen the same thing with Chip Roy. Here's my position, and here's my argument. Chip Roy, Rand Paul, Thomas Massie, these guys have been some of the most consistent, intellectually honest people within the legislature, within Congress, to call for significant reductions in spending, significant reductions in overall government power and structure. And they've been very, very loyal to that idea when it was very unpopular to be loyal to those ideas. And when many of us were crying out, going, why can't we do this? These were the guys that actually hurt us, and we're making the arguments, and we're doing their best. I saw someone the other day trashing Thomas Massie. It's like, he's worthless. He doesn't get any bills passed. I need to share something with you that's a little bit of inside baseball here. If you're the sort of person that is going to stand up and fight for these things, you're going to make enemies, not just on the other side of the aisle. You're going to make enemies on your side of the aisle, because it is easier to go along to get along. It just is. So if you're going to stand up and relentlessly fight and hold your own side to account, here's what's going to happen. Your bills don't get passed. Even when you have good bills, they don't get passed. Now, does that mean the legislation you support never gets passed? No. No, it does. It's just somebody else gets to carry it. You don't. So you submit a bill, and then magically someone else submits a bill, and theirs gets heard and yours doesn't. Why? Because you are being sent a message, and that message is stop rocking the boat. So here's what I'm going to tell you. When you see someone getting up and looking at like a Rand Paul or a Thomas Massie, like, oh, they don't get anything done. They didn't get any bills passed. I'm telling you right now, you are playing in to what the establishment does to shut down loud voices in favor of what you want. Now, on the other side of that, is it possible to demand too much all at once too quickly? Yes. Yes, it is. It is possible to do that. And it is fair for someone to actually look at them and be like, hey, look, man, is this at least moving the ball in the right direction? If it is, well, then maybe it's worth going along with it and continuing the fight, right? That's a legitimate argument too. But I will not accept what I believe is a really bad argument to say that when somebody is punished for doing the right thing and they don't get bills passed, to now come out and say because guess what? You just played into what the establishment wants you to think about that person. And how do I know this? I've experienced it. So I've been in the Virginia legislature for 10 years. I've had about 22 bills signed into law. Okay. I've carried a lot more legislation than that. But I carried bills like constitutional carry. I carried bills that were going after major tax cuts. I carried bills that were universal school choice. I carried bills that were controversial and difficult. I didn't carry a lot of bills that were like, kind of nice little working in the margins here and there. And I actually had a Republican tell me, well, you're a failure as a delegate because you haven't pressed more, but you need to work more across the aisle. I said, okay, well, the price of working across the aisle in this case is I have to compromise on things that I really believe in order to get bills that just don't do much. Is that what you want? Is that what you would prefer? Because that's not me. I will never be that person. Okay. You need people in the legislature that are constantly working to push the Overton window in the direction you want. Because if you don't, what ends up happening is the loudest voices on the left are the ones that keep pushing the Overton window to the left. And the next thing you know, conservatives are voting for things that 10 years ago would have been unthinkable. So I needed to make that argument because I've seen people I like and trust and generally agree with trashing these guys for you don't get anything done. Do not fall into that trap. Do not fall into that trap. Okay, let's see what Rand has to say about this because Rand has some of his own critiques. Here he goes. He goes, if the bill were solely about making the 2017 tax cuts permanent, I wouldn't be a yes, I'd be a hell yes. Unfortunately, that's not the reality with this bill. It includes the largest increase of the debt ceiling ever and will have the United States borrowing $5 trillion over the next 2 years. This bill is the opposite of conservative and we should not pass it. Okay, now here's what I'm going to say. Does any part of that make him a rhino or a filthy grandstander or, a fake conservative? No. Is any part of what he just said anti-MAGA? No. He's asking for more. He wants us to do more with the power that we have. Okay, let's look at some of the other things here. The path toward a stronger and richer America is clear. We must pass tax cuts, rein in reckless spending, and end Washington's addiction to debt. Only then can we restore economic prosperity, preserve individual freedom, and ensure that the American dream remains alive for generations to come. While I oppose increasing the debt limit by $5 trillion, I enthusiastically support making the tax cuts permanent. Right? And it goes on like this. He has acknowledged what he likes about something, but he wants to do more. Can we just all agree that that's what they should be doing in the Senate? That's what this negotiation should look like right now. Unless you believe that this bill is absolutely perfect the way it exists. And I don't mean perfect in the sense that it has everything you want. I mean perfect in the sense that it is something you could get past. Unless you believe that there's no improvements that can be done in it, why wouldn't you want this debate taking place in the Senate by someone who's been a champion for it?
I think some of it is because people have this idea that sometimes people want everything, so they won't take anything.
Yeah.
And so it's an all or nothing mentality. And I think that's what people are getting tired of because if it's all or nothing, we get nothing. Mm-hmm. We get nothing. And we've gotten that over and over and over and over again. And people are like, this is our one opportunity to get some of these things codified. And then we can address this other stuff. But from Rand's perspective, it is, well, they always say we're going to address this other stuff, and then we never do. But, I mean, at the end of the day, the debt ceiling is going to be raised because it has to be raised because we can't function without the debt at this point.
Yeah.
And so separating, I just kind of look at it and I'm like, I know that it should be done separately. I know that we shouldn't even have this whole thing looming all the time because we should have our spending under control. The problem is no matter how you slice it, a debt ceiling raise is going to have to happen because of the current predicament we're in. And everybody knows it. And I think Rand wants to have that fight separately. Everyone else is sick of every single one of our midterm elections getting destroyed because of that fight.
Yeah.
And so I think one of the reasons they want the debt ceiling hike to be so much higher is so that we don't have to deal with that during midterms.
I think
because
that's
we
accurate.
keep losing midterms because of that fight, because the Democrats will shut down the government.
I think the issue, so here I have a couple of points, right? That's the issue kind of against Rand. It's like, hey, Rand, I get you, I agree with you, but you're asking for a little bit too much within a process that can't achieve it right now.
Right.
Okay, by the same token, just like I did a Doge talk with Mark Wayne Mullen, I did a Doge talk with Rand Paul. And one of the things Rand kept saying over and over again, he goes, Nick, the swamp always seems to win. It always seems to win because of this whole idea of concentrated benefits and dispersed costs. When we talk about $5 trillion increase to the debt ceiling, we all recognize that it's a big number, but it's so big and it's so huge and we're so used to hearing it that it's almost, we kind of gloss over a little bit. And then we ask, why can't we get rid of this? Or why can't we get rid of that? And the reason why is very simple. It's because the people that are benefiting from these spending or benefiting from this bureaucracy benefit a lot. They benefit a lot to where they actually turn that into political activism, campaign donations, and everything else. When tens of millions of Americans are paying for it and it's a fraction of their tax bill, they're not motivated on the same level to go out and advocate for that individual spending to be cut. So the people that benefit from the spending are highly motivated to defend it. The people that are hurt by that spending are not as motivated to get rid of it. That's the whole concept of concentrated benefit and dispersed costs. And that's what we're running into. And what Rand is saying and what Massey is saying and what Elon is saying is like, guys, we have been doing this for decades now. Decades. It has gotten us to the point where inflation is a problem. It has gotten to a point where our treasury bonds are a problem. It has gotten to a part where, because we have to constantly fund these government programs, because we have to constantly fund these things, and they're not ultimately sustainable, we're working ourselves into a situation to where kicking the can down the road at some point is no longer an option. Christians said it best, right? Like the cynical joke is that no politician ever lost their seat for spending too much. And then Christian always says, but they have lost their heads. And it's true. You look at certain countries where they have actually created a sovereign debt crisis, and it's not that the politicians get unelected, they get guillotined, right?
They get unalived.
Right. And so the whole point is that these guys are saying, if not now, when? And when they're saying, well, just let us get to this and then we'll get to that. Don't you expect a guy like Rand Paul and Massey and Chip Roy to say, yeah, we've heard this before.
Yeah.
And so here's what I'm going to say before we move into like, okay, what's the answer? What's the answer? I think this debate is good. And I'm actually very, very happy that unlike there have been some debates where Trump has been able to squash it immediately just by coming down on one side or the other. You'll notice something. Trump has made some comments. He's made a lot of criticisms about Massey, but that's kind of well established. He's made some criticisms toward Rand Paul. He hasn't, to my knowledge, come out hard against Elon Musk yet. And part of that is because Trump is a leader and he needs to lead and he needs people on board with the plan. And I get that. And so he has played hardball, right? That's part of his negotiating tactic. And 99 times out of 100, you love it, right? But every once in a while, it's like, no, there needs to be, especially by people that have been people that we could trust throughout this fight. There are certain people when they stand up and they talk about the problem with debt, I don't believe them. I don't believe them because they can call themselves a Republican all day long. They only talk about debt when they're not out of power. They never talk about it when they're in power and can do something about it. I don't believe the Republicans, we need to get rid of Obamacare, and we voted 60 times to get rid of it. And the moment they actually had the ability to do it, they didn't. Like, I don't trust those people. But there's other people I do trust because they've been intellectually consistent and honest in hard times. And this debate, and these people do not deserve to be immediately dismissed as grandstanders or worthless or idiots or simply because now we're having this internal fight. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the time to have it. This is the time to have it when changes can still be made. Not only that, but I want people to know that we are not taking our eye off the ball. Because can I tell you what would have happened if this just all flew through? If this just all flew through with no discuss, no debate whatsoever, there'd be certain politicians, certain Republicans that would say, oh, see, there wasn't any big upcry. We were able to raise the debt limit. We were able to do this all. There was no problems. But now those same people, now what is happening? What Senator Wayne Mullins said it. He goes, look, we have to do this part through reconciliation because of the 51 votes, but then we're going to address these other issues through rescission. We're going to address these other issues when it comes up. But let's get the stuff done with the 51 that we can so we can then focus. Okay, great. Okay, that's an argument. That's an argument. It's a legitimate argument. But if this fight wasn't happening right now, I promise you there would be members of Congress that'd be like, do we really need those rescission bills? Do we really need to fight this battle with the 60 votes? I mean, after all, the Democrats can just filibuster it. So why are we bothering? Why don't we focus on something we can get done? No. Now, at the very least, if this goes through, everybody knows, no, we're watching. And if you were going to tell us we have to do this right now because of procedure, but then we'll get to this, oh, you better get to it. I want to see the fight. I don't want to hear, well, if the Democrats are going to stand up and oppose it, good. Let them make the argument for why they want millions of dollars going to trans operas in Colombia. And we can make the argument for why we want to give more money back to the American people. Make the argument. That's part of the reason why we sent you there. I get so tired of hearing, well, Nick, we just don't have. Look, once upon a time when everything was through the lens of legacy media and that was all we could rely upon, I get it. It was difficult to make certain arguments to the general population. That is not the world anymore. We have new media. We have other mechanisms to get out the message of what we're trying to do directly to the people without having to have Rachel Maddow's view of it. But if you're not willing to go out there and make those arguments, well, then, yeah, you don't deserve to be there because that's a part of what we're doing here. Being in the legislature is not simply about following the processes with respect to legislation and just going along to get along. It is standing up and using the pulpit you have to make an argument for the way you think things should be. And then voters get to look at it and say, you know what, that makes sense or that doesn't make sense. And then they get to decide, but give them something to decide between. And I have never been one of those people who have said there's no difference between Republicans and Democrats. That is one of the dumbest and laziest statements I've ever heard people make.
Yeah.
It is a lazy statement. You are right that there is very little difference between some Republicans and Democrats, but there is massive difference between the two parties. The problem is again, people need to understand what is the nature of those differences. What is the nature of the processes that are followed? Again, I appreciate Senator Wayne Mullins explaining, hey guys, he's like, I know it's wonky, but just follow with me. This is what we're continuing with. This is the structure that we have to operate within. Okay. But what I need Senator Wayne Mullins to know is that ultimately I think Rand Paul is right about all of the cuts that need to take place. I think what Elon is bringing up is absolutely essential. And it's no longer going to be good enough to just say, oh, well, maybe after the midterms or after the next election cycle or after we get this bill done. If you're telling me after we get this bill done, then you better believe it. I'm standing by waiting for this. If you try to run on this bill without doing the other things, do not count on our support. Don't count on it. Because that is the part that we're at. And look, I don't mean this to be all doom and gloom. This is actually an amazing opportunity. This is an amazing opportunity to actually go after some of the structural changes that need to take place. Because I've said this before, one of the things the Democrats are really, really good at is whenever they're governing, they are willing to go as far and as fast as they possibly can, knowing that it might cost them an intermediary election, but knowing that they will have grown the size of government, grown the budget in such a way to where Republicans are not going to be effective in getting rid of it. And then what happens? Well, eventually they win another election, and now they've got a bigger government, a bigger budget, and that's how this rolls, right? They are willing to lose some intermediate elections if it means their overall agenda is getting through. I want to see the same commitment from Republicans because, guys, can I just let you in on a little secret here? One of the biggest things that Doge uncovered was that Democrats are using our tax dollars to fund their agenda against over half the country. I promise you the vast majority of the country does not want their tax dollars funding trans ideology. And yet it was. Now, part of the reason why it was doing that was not just to fund ideology. Who was it funding? Their allies. And what do their allies do with a portion of the money they get?
They donate to their campaigns.
They donate it to campaigns.
It's just a big washing machine.
You are not, when you cut when you cut 780 million tax dollars from Planned Parenthood, you're not just cutting into an organization that kills children for profit, right? You are cutting in to the campaign coffers of all the Democrats who took that money from taxpayers and gave it to their political allies. That means less campaign mailers, less door knockers, less TV ads, less influence with the media, because they were using our tax dollars to do it. So understand something. Let Nancy Pelosi get up there and talk about what you're actually doing is you're cutting money for poor people. Nobody believes her. Nobody believes her, except her base that are going to believe her no matter what she says. But here's the practical effect is she's going to be able to say that on Twitter all she wants. She'll be able to go on MSNBC and say it all she wants. She's not going to have anywhere near the reach she once would have had. Why? Because she's no longer allowed to steal our tax dollars in order to amplify it. If you make the cuts. All right. Let's go into the last part of this here. But before I do that, I want to let you all know, like, if you are interested in actually being a part of a pregame and postgame, that's right. This podcast actually has a pregame and a postgame where we talk to our members of our community. You can actually go into the link in the description for this podcast, join that community. It really helps us out a great deal. Plus, you get some added goodies from being a member of that community, to include asking questions, being a part of the chat, all of that good stuff. So go ahead and check out the link in the description. Go over there and join our community if you appreciate what we're doing. This is a great way to support.
That's where I get all my spiciness out of my system before we start. I say all the weird things that cross my mind, and then I'm on my best behavior during the podcast.
Which many of you are like, that's your best behavior? Like, oh yeah. There's a side to Tina that comes out in pregame and postgame that is I'll just say I don't know if this channel would make it.
It's a little spicy.
I don't know if YouTube would appreciate some of Tina's hot takes. Okay, let's go to the last part here, and that's, is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? I'm going to say this. I think this debate is a good thing for all the reasons I just mentioned. So here's what I would see as the positive manifestation of this, and I'm going to give you a positive way that this could play out with the bill passing or not passing. The bill not passing is that it would reinvigorate this idea that, no, we want substantive change and we're going to demand it and we want it fought for. And if the Democrats are going to fight it, great, let them fight it and let us make a better argument. Let's convince people and let's get it done, right? That's one positive manifestation of it. The other positive manifestation of this debate is the bill actually goes through. The bill actually passes. They get the necessary votes in the Senate, but they get some compromise. They get some additional things that they want in there. They clean up some other stuff that maybe Tax Foundation has talked about, that Rand Paul, that Elon Musk has talked about. They get some of that done. And then directly after that discussion, when they're talking about other forms of spending that is going to be up for a 60 vote in the Senate instead of just the 51, that's when they can tackle some other things, right? That would be, one of those is more positive than the others, but that's a potentially positive manifestation, is that because we have this debate, the bill actually ends up being better than what left the House, and all of Congress knows that we're actually serious about the cuts, and we expect to see them going out there and advocating for significant structural cuts to the federal bureaucracy. Now, I can already see people's faces rolling their eyes saying, Nick, you're naive. I didn't say I think that's what's most likely to happen. I said that is a positive thing that potentially could happen through all of this. Here's the negative thing that could happen, right? The minor negative thing that could happen is all of this goes through. There is no real significant improvements to this bill. And the end result is that because of some of the difficulty and the complications that we read through in the Tax Foundation model, this doesn't impact people the way they were anticipating. So what ends up happening is you get the classic case of overpromise, underdeliver. And now we didn't get to maximize the use of our time with the 2 years that we have. We lose seats in the midterms, and the Democrats take control of either the House or the Senate. I highly doubt they'll take control of both. But let's say they take the House. That's a potential thing that could happen. And now all of a sudden you can't do any of it. It's never going to happen. And all we're going to be subjected to is the House coming out and wanting to do investigations on everything with Elon Musk and the Trump administration. And the last 2 years of the Trump administration are basically bogged down in the House engaging and Democrat controlled House engaging in the kind of like show trials that they did before. Right. So that's one negative manifestation. Another highly negative manifestation of that is this fight turns into something that genuinely splits the party. Donald Trump has done an excellent job of kind of keeping really what is kind of a delicate and fairly new coalition together. I give him a great deal of credit for that. But this could be something that potentially breaks it, because there are fundamental issues here that that some of us need to know are being addressed and are recognized. And we're not just going through the typical process where we promise a whole lot, deliver very little, and then pretend as if it was something monumental, when in reality, it might have been big, but it was just, it still kept the structure as it exists in place. And this is the part that I hope that the Trump administration understands, that I think, I don't want to speak for Rand or Massey or Chip Roy or any of those guys, but if I had to guess, what they're after is they believe in what the overall picture of what Trump is trying to do and what Elon and Doge have done with respect to uncovering the spending problems and the federal bureaucracy. This is something that nothing Doge uncovered surprised Rand Paul. Nothing Doge uncovered surprised guys like Chip Roy or Thomas Massey, and there's others too that I should include in that list. And they've been fighting it, and they really have been, in many respects, just pilloried by the media, by Democrats, by members of their own party. And they came into this administration very, very hopeful that Donald Trump was going to go after this. And they're worried. They're worried that maybe some of the motivation is waning. Now, one of the things Trump is very good at is not showing all of his cards in the midst of negotiation, and I appreciate that. I think it's actually important. But can I just say, I honestly believe that's what some of the concern is here. It's the concern that Trump would be willing to do these things, but he's got to operate within a process and a Congress and it may be a Senate majority leader that is not as eager to do it. And they don't want to skip the chance. And hear me when I say this. They don't want to skip the chance because they increasingly believe it may be one of our last opportunity. We are at a point right now with respect to debt, with respect to inflation, with respect to government spending, with respect to the near uninterrupted march of the bureaucracy, that things could go bad pretty quick, right? All it would take is something, fairly significant to create a scenario where now all of a sudden we're way beyond arguing about, the top marginal tax rate. And we're dealing with real issues of a sovereign debt crisis. We're dealing with real issues where people who depended on programs that were not solvent are now not getting the checks, or they are getting the checks, but it doesn't buy anything because of inflationary policy. They are living in a world where they see the very real possibility of a new administration coming in, undoing everything that's happened, and really doubling down in a way that is potentially catastrophic. A lot of the worst policies that have happened in the country have actually happened at the state level, but don't for 1 minute doubt the Democrats would love to impose all of it at the federal level if they had the chance, they had a shot. And so they are seeing this as a very unique period of time. It's the first, let me put it this way, it's the first time in my lifetime, first time, 45, first time in my lifetime we have had a president willing, a Congress that is capable, a Supreme Court that would be generally supportive, or at least, again, I'm not saying that all of this is ideal. Again, people will look at me and be like, you idiot, you really think John Thune? I'm like, stop. I said it's the best opportunity of my lifetime. I didn't say the conditions were ideal. They don't want to lose it. They don't want to lose it. They're not your enemy. They're not your enemy. And I'm really hopeful that the Trump administration ultimately doesn't see them as the enemy, and that there can be some sort of reconciliation that takes place here. Because I do trust the motivations of the Trump administration, but I also trust the motivations of people like Rand Paul, Thomas Massey, and Chip Roy, among others. They don't deserve the ire and the frustration that most of Congress deserves. And so I'm really hoping that those two entities can come together and actually find a way to navigate through this that doesn't waste this truly unique, and for me, first in my lifetime opportunity. Tina, do you got anything you want to?
No, I think you said everything.
Okay. Well, I hope we got to all of those. We do have some questions in the audience that we haven't been able to get to yet, and so I want to make sure that we tackle some of those. For those of you in the audience that you have questions that you haven't seen those get to, can you, if you wouldn't mind re-putting those in the chat, we'll tackle them right now.
I'm actually not seeing questions.
I know there was a two that we. One was a question. Yeah, Christian asked, "Are we doomed?" Christian, you always think we're doomed. No, we're not. We're not doomed. We're not doomed because Jesus. Whitfield asked, question, can reps pass individual bills that are already in the big, beautiful bill? Yeah, theoretically you could. So here's the deal. and I'm not going to claim to be an expert on this. I know, like in the state legislature, the budget bill is one vote. You vote on the budget, right? For the federal side, it's a little bit different. They have 12 different bills that comprise the entire budget, and there's individual line items. So theoretically, you could take out those individual line items, and I think theoretically you could take those out and you could vote for those separately. The question is do they then incorporate into the larger bill, and do you have one big vote? And so I would say that from what I understand, there is a path to where they could break certain things out and vote on them individually. Rand Paul has talked about that. He's like, look, if we want to vote on the tax cuts separately from the debt ceiling, I'm willing to do that. I'll vote to make the tax cuts permanent, but I cannot in good conscience vote to increase the debt ceiling. Now, a lot of people will say, okay, well, structurally, it doesn't work that way. Okay, well, again, then go ahead, vote on them separately, and let's see what happens. Part of the reason why they condense all of these votes into one bill is because they don't want there to be that distinction, because they don't think it works unless it passes as a package. And so could they vote on more of these things individually? I believe the answer is yes. Will they? They probably don't want to because of the implications of what it means for the overall bill.
Aiden asks, do you think that we'll get another chance to avoid a large-scale debt crisis if we don't get it done this time?
Yes, I do still think it's possible. It's okay.
Not likely.
Is it possible?
But possible.
Yes. Is it likely? I will say it becomes less likely as we go on. I don't think, like right now we've got a kind of a narrow window, and it's still not ideal. Again, it's still not ideal. Please, Mark Wayne Mullen is not wrong when he says, look, if we need 60 votes, we don't get what we want because we can't find enough Democrats to cross the aisle and vote with us on it. He's not wrong on that.
Yeah.
He's not wrong on that. But the question is do we expect conditions to get better? And that's the part where I think that's a really, really, problematic argument.
It's the best opportunity we've ever had.
Yeah. You've got
to think that we'd get another one would be very presumptuous. We should not operate as though there is another opportunity.
I will say this, though. There's a lot of people up there that when they're making decisions about what can be done, one of the things they factor in is people don't understand the process. They don't. And I've watched people that I know, that I like, that I respect, make comments where I'm looking at them going, it doesn't work that way. And it's not, and Trump can't just make it work that way, right? Speaker Johnson can't just make it work that way. There's certain procedures in place that are part of long established rules or constitutional responsibilities that you can't just ignore to do what you want. And unfortunately, members of Congress know that people don't know that. And so they would rather give you something to say, look, we did it, as opposed to explain the process for you. It's one of the reasons why, even though Senator Mullen and I don't always agree, I really appreciate that he's willing to take the time to explain process.
Okay, the next question is from Loyal to Law. Are these changes easily reversible by the next administration?
Part of the reason why Trump wants this budget passed so bad, or they want bills passed so bad, is because then it makes it more difficult to do. So a lot of the things, as we mentioned before, DOJ can't cut anything. DOJ can't fire anyone. DOJ can only make recommendations. The administration has taken a lot of the money that DOJ has found and they've sequestered it, which is to say that it didn't go out, it didn't get spent, but it's still stuck there. They can't reincorporate it into the budget without a revision bill or without something else. So part of the reason why Trump is pushing so hard for this is they do want to try to make these structural changes in a way that's very difficult for a future, Congress or president to just arbitrarily change it. And so that's why we're going through this process right now. Because if it was all just executive order, well, then yeah, a different administration, different executive orders, and all of this is undone.
The next question is from Rented Mule. It says, question, will no tax on tips work in states with a minimum wage?
So
I could have sworn all states had a minimum wage. Are
there's
any?
A federal minimum wage.
Okay.
So there's a federal minimum wage, and then states have individual minimum wages. And the answer is that since this doesn't apply to your state taxes, it applies to your federal taxes. So insofar as they're collecting taxes from you on your federal income,
basically the state will have to make the case for why they need your tip money.
Yeah, and then there's going to be other provisions in there as well. Probably they're going to have to come up with specific rules on what applies as a tip, because think about it, right? Somebody could say, oh, I no longer pay my employees salaries, I give them tips, right? So they're going to actually have to, this is where Tax Foundation says, look, this all sounds nice until you realize that people are not going to implement this the way you want them to. They're going to implement it in the way that works best for them. So if can I just automatically say my employees don't get salaries, they get tips, no taxes? No, Treasury and the IRS is going to have to come up with rules which defines what constitutes a tip. And then people are going to try to manipulate that process. So this is why, again, whenever we say something like this, it always sounds simple until people try to game the system.
Okay, so next question, Alpha 7 says, do you know the details of this? Oh, do you know the details of the cut to Planned Parenthood and what exactly is cut? Planned Parenthood's defunded in this bill.
Yeah, so I actually talked with a good friend of ours, Kristen Hawkins, who runs Students for Life, and they're they want this bill to pass in part because they're an organization that focuses on the pro-life movement. And
it's the first and only time that Planned Parenthood has been defunded in any kind of bill like this and actually had an opportunity to pass. So she said they're going to be grading it.
Yeah,
and so if you're voting against it, you voted against defunding Planned Parenthood.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, but I understand why she says that, because her main passion is saving human lives. Well, when money is on one side and human life is on the other, she's going to grade it.
Well, look, I don't think I think there's other conditions.
It's not that cut and dry. I know, but for her it is. So
well, look, I think I love Christian, I love Students for Life, and I completely understand why they're doing what they're doing. And look, I would actually, I said this before in our Doge talk about this. I just hate that this is becoming an either or proposition. Hey, if you want to get rid of, if you want to get rid of $780 million for Planned Parenthood that they should never be receiving from taxpayers, then you have to agree to between 3 to 5 trillion in debt ceiling increases. That sucks, right? Like, and I get to say it sucks because I'm not sitting here telling people that if they vote for this, they're evil. If they don't vote for it, they're great. I get that it's complicated, and I want to be very upfront and intellectually honest when I say that. But I'm tired of the either or propositions on things like this.
The problem is I think that their fear is that it is because that is the most vulnerable thing in that bill. That a lot of rhinos and various people where it's not popular for them to do this are going to want another crack at taking that out of it.
Yeah.
And so the idea that the situation is urgent, I would agree with.
Yeah, no, I'm not criticizing Kristen at all. Their organization is wonderful. Serve Potatoes asks, question, can a portion of it just be publicity for folks to stop trashing his Teslas and Trump and Elon are on good terms?
It could be.
That's an interesting question, right? Because could it be something where they're so let's play 7-dimensional chess now, right? Where Elon and Trump, they're fine. They get what's going on. Because Trump hasn't really come out hard against Elon.
No, he did. He actually did.
Did he come out hard on
He
Elon?
said that Elon's only saying this because this bill cuts his EV credits.
So here's what I'll say on that one. This is one of the things. I don't particularly like about Trump on certain things. I get it when Trump goes after people and Trump makes things very personal. I get frustrated when he does it toward people that I think are good people. And on the whole have worked very, very hard to try to do things. I realize it's a tactic. I don't like it. And again, a lot of people are going to say, I don't care if you like it. That's fine. He doesn't care if I like it, right? I'm just telling you what I think. I think that there's a certain degree. I give a degree of deference to Trump even when he does things that I don't particularly like. I give a deference to other people who I trust, who I feel like are legitimately on my side and who are fighting for the things I want to fight for. When we have disagreements on something, I don't automatically question their motivations or their intentions or their character.
But I do notice that as much as Trump is willing to kind of go after people personally and kind of say things off the cuff, say things that are a little bit out of pocket about people publicly, the one thing is that the man does not seem to hold a grudge. If somebody shows deference to him and they support him in an area, he will soften to them. He will he doesn't seem to hold a long-term grudge.
Well, a lot of people chalk up what he says to ego. They say, oh yeah, of course, as soon as you kiss the ring, he's your best buddy and you're wonderful. It's like, okay.
As soon as he feels like you're an ally again, he relents.
One explanation is this is all ego. The other explanation is no, it's all negotiating tactics.
Yeah, it is.
And so again, I think it's fair to look at that. But
I would say, yes, he definitely has an ego. But he's also a master negotiator.
Yeah, no question. So Sir Potatoes, to answer your question, I don't think it's as simple as just publicity for certain things or for the other side to start praising Elon Musk. I don't think that's going to happen. I think there's genuine frustration here. By the same token, I'm not completely closed off to the idea that some of it could potentially be manufactured. But we'll see. Because again, seventh dimensional chess. Trump and Elon manufacture an argument over them because Trump wants actually this bill to be better. And now there's a different mechanism to come in and force the negotiations to make it a little bit better. Trump gets to reconcile both sides on this thing. Everyone's friends again. Trump gets an even better bill. Again,
never know,
right? And I'm not someone that chalks everything up to genius. But again, I think Trump's going to
I think he's willing for this to pass and he'll sign it. But if he can get something better, he'd sign that too.
Yeah.
So I think Trump just wants as much as he can possibly get.
Yes.
And he's not going to like cut off his nose to spite his face. He's going to go ahead and sign whatever they give to him. But if they can give him something better, he'll sign that.
Yeah, I think so. Erica says, question, are we out of time to take advantage of the opportunity if we had? If not, will President Trump stop focusing on foreign issues long enough to pressure Congress into taking advantage of it? I don't think so. Obviously, Trump has to be focused on some of these foreign issues to the extent that that's one of the primary functions of both the federal government and specifically the presidency. So many of these other issues can be handled by Congress, or the stage of the process that they're in is predominantly Congress's responsibility. Foreign policy is something that the president has to be actively engaged in. And so I don't think it's an either or proposition. The other thing I will say is that I think President Trump has done a very good job of when he picks up the phone and says something, people generally get in line. So we'll see what happens. Again, my hope is I think one of the more positive results we can realistically expect is that you see some changes in the Senate that the House is willing to go for that makes the bill better. And you see this renewed commitment to, even if this passes, it doesn't end there, right? They do tackle the next responsibility the way that Senator Mullen was suggesting was the strategy. So we'll see. Again, look, I get that I'm sometimes a little bit too optimistic. What I would ask you to understand is that I'm not naive. I've seen firsthand government budget processes. Erica asked another question. Are these changes? Oh, she already asked that one. Easily reversible. Yeah, we answered that one. I think that's it.
Let's so
do
I
we
think
have
we can
let me do one more check here. You got a hot date, babe?
We're ready to wrap it up.
All right.
Yes, my hot date. I'm going to Costco with Allie.
Oh, that's right. Our youngest daughter is celebrating her high school graduation, and so we're getting stuff ready for the party. Getting stuff ready for the party. Good Ranchers will be there.
Yes. Also, go over to Nick's social media and check out the cool highlight of our son.
Yeah, on Facebook, I showed the highlight that they had from his basic training unit. They highlight kind of a different troop, a different soldier each week, I think, or something like that. And his
there's
name
a
got
drawing
picked this time.
for a different soldier each week. So
I
stuck his roster number in there, and I won against like 80 other parents who put their kids' roster number in there, and I was really excited.
Yeah. Well, here's the last thing I want to say with this. Hopefully, here's my goal in doing this. It wasn't to condemn the people that are voting for it or against it. It wasn't to praise everyone voting for or against it. It was to kind of go through this process of understanding what are all of the different factors at play here. What are all the different factors with respect to what's in the bill? What are the benefits? What are the pros? What are the cons? What are the procedural limitations that we're actually working with? What are some of the negotiation tactics that might be coming into play here? The one thing that I'm really hoping for everyone on this is that this doesn't cause a split, doesn't cause a bad split, because I think the people that are fighting right now are fighting to try to make something better. And I do see some good arguments on both sides of this particular discussion. But I also want to make it very, very clear that this bill in and of itself is not even close to being enough. It's not even close to being enough. So if the idea behind some Republicans is, well, we'll just get this done and then we can run on it and then you need to understand. Whereas I'm willing to allow this, whereas I'm willing as a voter, I'm not trying to be overly arrogant here, but whereas I'm willing to say, okay, I understand I can't get everything I want, but it needs to be moving in the right direction. A $5 trillion debt limit increase is not moving in the right direction. So there needs to be some changes. There needs to be some changes in the bill the way it currently exists, and it can't stop here. This can't be the laurels. This is not the thing that can define the Trump presidency or Congress's actions over these 2 years. We need to see more. We need to see more. And I hope we will. And I think if we're paying attention, we will. I think if we're paying attention, if we can keep it together and we can not do what conservatives typically like to do, which is eat each other as soon as possible, like destroy each other, I think we can get through this. I think we can actually have some good, hard internal debates and come out better for it on the other end. That is what I pray is going to be taking place. Once again, thank you very much for watching. We hope you found this beneficial. Go over, check out our community in the chat, and we'll see you next time. Maybe next time we'll see you in something we call Superior Chat. Ooh. What's that? Well, they're about to find out in post game. All right. Thank you very much. We'll see you next episode.